Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to our panel session titled Developing and Retaining Talent, Keeping the Best and the Brightest in the BioHealth Capital Region. My name is Joe Sanchez, Director of R&D Science Engagement, Global Corporate Affairs for AstraZeneca. I'm joined today by three distinguished panelists, and I'd like to begin by inviting each to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their organizations. Christine, can we start with you?
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure to be with you and with all the other panel members. As Joe mentioned, I'm Christine Dinovin. I'm the president and CEO of MS, a contract research organization based in Rockville, Maryland. And our mission is advancing public health and bioinnovation with biopharmaceutical clients, as well as partnering with the US government, the NIAID in particular. So we really are focused on three main therapeutic areas: on vaccines and infectious disease, on eye disease, ophthalmology, as well as rare disease. Those would be our top three areas of research interest.
That's great, thank you. JB?
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. I'm JB Holston. I'm the CEO of the Greater Washington Partnership. The partnership is a C3 that was formed about a little bit over 4 years ago that is funded by roughly 40 of the largest employers across different sectors in the region. Organizations that range from Johns Hopkins, Georgetown and Howard, to MedStar and Innova in the health field, to technology firms like Microsoft and Amazon, and financial services firms and military contractors and other. The mission of the organization is to tackle issues that need to have solutions catalyzed that are regional. We've defined the region for purposes of this work as extending from Baltimore to Richmond. And the general frame for the work that we've adopted over the last year in particular is what we call inclusive growth. So think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the intersection of all of that with growth. Our partners believe that the area that is the most inclusive and equitable will also be the most attractive to talent and also be able to retain talent better than any other region in the country. And so we're focused on making sure that's true here. And then we tackle big long-term issues like wealth equity is clearly one, but digital skills and talent in the region, growing that pipeline, a more diverse and inclusive, but also larger pipeline is a focus for us. Transportation is another focus for the work for the partnership as well. Thanks for having us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, JB. And Jim.
Hello, thank you, Joe. Yes, Jim Hughes. I am Senior Vice President for Economic Development with the University of Maryland, Baltimore. And just about myself personally, my primary focus is making connections for the university and our faculty with the business community. So this is a wonderful opportunity for me. The University of Maryland, Baltimore is, of course, one of the institutions within the university system of Maryland. We are based in downtown Baltimore City. We're primarily a professional school, graduate school. So we have 7,000 students. 3/4 of them are pursuing professional degrees, MDs, JDs, PharmDs. I'll just run through all of our schools. We don't have that many, but medicine, pharmacy, dentistry, nursing, in the healthcare arena. We have wonderful schools of law and social work, and then also a graduate school. The university is very research intensive. 40% of our budget, nearly $700 million, is devoted to life sciences research done on behalf of the federal government, private foundations, and over 200 companies around the world. We are also teamed very closely with the University of Maryland Medical System, which has 13 hospitals throughout the state of Maryland. And so we are very, very involved in patient delivery and looking at the future of health in the state of Maryland. And then finally, we are also involved in developing a biopark. University of Maryland Biopark is on 14 acres of land here in Baltimore City. We have 30 companies employing about 1,400 people. In that, and we are furiously working to bring new buildings and new companies online. So eager to be part of the discussion today. Thank you.
That's great. Well, welcome to all of you. So let's first focus on demand for talent in the region. So the BioHealth Capital Region has been growing over the years, striving to become at least the third-ranked biohub in the country by 2023. Add to that the recent influx of capital that has catalyzed substantial growth of resident companies, as well as the creation and attraction of more organizations within the region. So my first overarching question is really, what does the industry need as far as talent, and how do we know? So Christine, I'd like to start with you. If you could please discuss the growth of a company like MS and the type of talent needed with respect to core competencies and key experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's really the number one most important topic to our company is how to grow our workforce and to grow both in the US, but grow globally as well. And then to have diverse and integrated teams to implement our clinical trials. So I think that the key skill set that we find most important to the success of our business is a combination of data skills, data analytics, data management, statistical analysis, of course. That's the founding of our company and one of the core strengths of the company to this day. But then also the traditional backgrounds that are in the biological sciences, so nursing, pharmacy, degrees in biology, that we can use as the background to grow the specific clinical trial skills that are needed for our industry. Because as you know, and I'm sure others on the panel know, it's a highly regulated environment that we work in. And there's no real course you can take in school to teach you exactly how to implement a clinical trial or a drug development program. So there's a lot of training that happens in our industry. So we want to start with the best talent and the basic educational backgrounds that are needed, but then have robust training programs and robust mentoring programs to really help advance the development of our employees, our colleagues. So those are the areas I would say are the key. The classic STEM background plus the biological sciences are key for us.
That's great. I think the list you created there really resonates with Jim, right? Who just described all the professional schools that are at UMB. Mm-hmm. Great connection to be made there for sure. Jim, in addition to UMB, but also looking at the entrepreneurial community, right? The startup community. Can you give us their perspective with respect to talent demand?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So we are involved in creating companies based on technologies invented at UMB. It's about a dozen companies a year, which has grown considerably. If we just go back half a dozen years ago, it was 3 companies a year. So we're seeing considerable momentum there. And that's really a combination of a greater focus of the university on doing these entrepreneurial activities, but I think it's also an indication of the growing richness of the entrepreneurs in the state of Maryland. Sometimes we bemoan probably too loudly the lack of entrepreneurs here, but I'm really seeing that change as we've had more companies be successful. We had a company a few years ago get acquired, and we've had 4 companies spin out of that from the people who put that team together. So we are, when you're looking at those first half dozen people, really looking at people who have experience with other entrepreneurial companies. So I think, part of what's critical is events like this, ideally in person, where people can get to know one another. So good people can find that next opportunity. We are then the next challenge is as those companies are successful. We had a relatively small company. Actually, Joe, you were part of it way back when, Paragon, and they were acquired a couple of years back by Catalent. They are a GMP manufacturer, and Catalent has added 1,000 employees in the state of Maryland just in the last 12 months. So we start, I'm finding that it's actually as companies start ramping up and they're looking at the more technical skills is where we might want to focus more of our attention, so that when we get those large growth in jobs that we're able to create those opportunities for our graduates coming out of our undergrad institutions.
That's great. Thank you for that. So you discussed again, the early stage companies in particular. JB, if I could go to you, now Greater Washington Partnership has relationships with several mature companies, right? Not just the biopharmaceutical sector, but you discussed, cross-sector as well. What are you hearing with respect to projected growth in this region and the talent needed to drive not just the science forward, but also the business forward?
Yeah, thanks for that. And I would, echo my colleagues on the panel on by calling out data and STEM related or tech related skills. We published a piece in July. McKinsey did some work for us, and we were looking at the gap for what we called tech positions and tech adjacent positions in the region. We forecast that out and said, and the data was pretty stark. It said by 2025, there could be roughly 60,000 jobs a year going unfilled. That's per year, that are either tech specific jobs, so think about traditional STEM kinds of jobs, or tech adjacent jobs, jobs where you need to have a fair amount of tech literacy, digital literacy in order to do the work. So we're clearly hearing that across sectors. It's MedStar, the big healthcare companies will tell you that their needs on the data and the digital literacy front are as big as JP Morgan Chase or Cap One. So clearly that's a category of great opportunity, but it also is going to require a lot of creativity, because I think it's pretty clear that the traditional, if we rely strictly on the traditional means to fill that gap, we're not going to get there. And in particular, if we're looking to fill that with as diverse and equitable a population as possible, we're going to need to find alternative mechanisms in order to fill that gap. But we would call that out. I guess the last point I'd make on that, Joe, is that particularly with the focus on diversity and inclusion and more diverse pathways, the onus is going to be on the organizations, and I think they're realizing this, to do more in support of those prospective employees. That it isn't just a matter of having a traditional career fair and hiring the person with the best pedigree at the best school and you're off to the races. There's a lot more required to ensure that as broad a set of talent as possible has not just that first job, but actual careers.
Oh, that's great. And I think the next question I have was really about success stories about sourcing talent locally in particular. And I think you gave us an example there of major companies that come to the region because they are confident in the caliber of talent we have here and that's available. Maybe Christine, if I could ask you then, can you tell us about the success you've had in sourcing talent locally?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we've done very well this year hiring locally. And I think the keys to that success that I've observed are, number one, our mission. People want not just a job, they want a career, as mentioned, but they also want a connection to a higher purpose. So the mission statement of our company being focused on supporting the advancement of public health has been a big reason why we've been chosen over another opportunity that a person might have with the same basic benefits packages. So when everything else is essentially the same, everyone's working from home too, so location isn't quite as critical. Whether you're in Virginia or Maryland or DC, you don't have to worry about the commute as much as people used to worry about at MS in the past. So we've been fortunate locally that our mission statement really resonates. Number two, I think that we have a big alumni program. So our statisticians, many of them have PhDs, master's degrees, same with our pharmacists. They're tapping into their school networks, their alumni programs to basically introduce our company to some of the new grads. And we're not of the size where we're doing many career fairs, and we're certainly not doing them in person. So now it's a bit more of the word of mouth. We're finding that connecting to the alumni associations has been another key factor. And then third, we've adjusted salaries. It's a competitive marketplace for talent in our region. And we've had to lift salaries and compensation in general. And I think that is maybe a result a bit of the pandemic, that there's, some dynamic changes happening in the workforce. But I also think it's what's been mentioned by other panelists. It's the evolution of our industry becoming more data and technology oriented. You're starting to see a real, demand for talent, a war for talent in those areas, and that's lifting salaries. So I think it's all good. It's been good for us because we've been able to respond to some of the dynamic changes in the talent environment. But I think it's something we have to stay on top of. You can't let it out of your focus for very long.
That's great. I always say that competition drives excellence, right? We can't get complacent, and that drives us to improve our company culture as a retention strategy. So I think what we really have is a very healthy talent food web, if you will. Christine, let me just follow with another question though. Under what circumstances does your company feel it needs to look outside the region to fill roles?
I think that we do. We also are in a global business. We do need local regional talent to be implementing our global clinical trials. So in some ways, it's not a reaction to the talent competition here in the US. It's the nature of our business. But we're looking to Central and Eastern Europe has been a really great area for us to find very well qualified people with a STEM background with good technology skills. And that's been a help for us. I think also we've looked to Canada. The ability for our teams in North America to work very closely together in a similar time zone, depending on where you are in the US and Canada, it's been a natural extension of our US team. So those are the two areas where we've grown the most. We've also grown in India. We have an office in India. And there, the war for talent is even greater than here. So we've had to balance the ability to hire with, as you mentioned, investing in retention and culture building, so that the teams in India feel that they're part of a bigger organization. They're connected to something bigger than a regional hub, and that we have found has really helped our retention.
Oh, that's great. So sticking with the robust talent pool that we have here, and maybe discussing educational and training programs that are meant to cultivate that talent. Jim, if I could hand that to you, how is an institution like UMB or the Biopark organized to produce competitive talent for the industry? And how do you stay abreast of trends to ensure you're cultivating talent in anticipation of future demand?
Yeah. Well, a couple thoughts. It's always something, it's a huge focus for us and something we're always trying to get better at. A lot of it is interaction with companies, talking to as many CEOs and hiring managers as possible. So we're not in that ivory tower where we're figuring out what is best and we unleash people on the world. So it's really that type of engagement, and you're seeing much more of that happening. The other thing is looking at an institution like UMB, where we have, as I described, these very strong health sciences programs. And as Christine and JB both have mentioned, and you've mentioned, we're getting this convergence with the IT sector. So we have teamed with University of Maryland College Park in particular to create a joint center for health informatics, and also a joint institute for bioengineering and medical devices. So we're bringing together the disciplines that of the IT and the engineering side with the health sciences to try to produce the type of workers and talents that are really needed in industry here. Also looking at the whole spectrum. So we have brought the Baltimore City Community College and joined with them to create a life sciences institute in our biopark. So they are providing associate degrees and certificate, and actually if local clinical trial company needs 40 phlebotomists, they will train 40 phlebotomists. So it's that real hands-on training that is a very different way of looking at the world than 10 years ago when we were focused on producing the best MDs who would get the best residencies, and we still do that, but we're having to be more creative, and I think we're much better for it.
That's great, and you touched on the feedback cycle too. So you have the supply of talent, and then you're reaching out to the private sector to understand what their needs are, to make sure that you're always pivoting and supplying the right kind of talent, which is great. And JB, I know that GWP has a program, the CoLab program, which it sounds like it's doing this at scale. Can you please tell us all about that program, and especially about any success you've been able to measure?
Yeah. Thanks for that. So the CoLab is a program that involves about 25 employers and 20 higher ed institutions, as well as 5 K through 12 jurisdictions throughout the region. And what's interesting and unique about it is that it was initially set up by getting the employers to all sit around the table to create what we call an employer signaling system. And in particular to specify at a pretty low level of detail the knowledge, skills, and capabilities that they felt they needed employees to have across a variety of different digital skill categories. So think machine learning, think AI, think data science more broadly, et cetera. Which we then would take to the higher ed institutions and say, what programming do you have or do you want to stand up that meet these requirements? And if you meet these requirements, then students that go through those programs will be certified as having met those KSAs, et cetera. And what's been fascinating about it is, well, a couple of things. One is getting all the employers around the table from all those different industries to collectively agree what they thought the KSA should be for different subcategories was in itself pretty unique. Then getting a bunch of different higher ed institutions from across jurisdictions, at also K through 12, because we have a program called Talent Ready, which is designed to step that down for the K through 12 sector. That was also pretty rare. It's tough to get all those different constituents around one table. But I think it's a hallmark of the region's advantages that we could do that. And it calls to mind, we were very involved in the recruiting for Amazon HQ2. And one of the things we did is we had a letter signed by 89 higher ed leaders across the region saying, Amazon, just come. We don't care where you come, just come. And while that sounds kind of banal and et cetera, it was helpful, because if you'll recall that that was not the kind of letters they were getting from New York at the time. But that's the structure. And the general idea is, gee, if you can get industry to sit down and say what specifically they would hire against, and then you can go to the educational establishments and see whether they're already doing it. In many cases, they already are. Jim's institution is a good one, where they could look at their existing curricula and say, hey, we've got these program offerings in different majors, minors, whatever, that meet these requirements. And so now we will certify that those students have those capabilities. We then can go back to the employers and say, look, here's a pipeline of students. So that's the way the program works. We just launched a $5 million scholarship fund to support students who go through that, who come from more diverse backgrounds as well, Joe, back to the point about trying to have a more diverse and equitable pipeline of talent too, because we have found the data would suggest that there are ranges of kinds of capital that more diverse populations of students don't have access to. Financial is one, social is another, and so those are all opportunities for employers to basically have a broader and deeper pipeline of talent. But that's the construct.
Well, that's great, and that that certainly covers the technical training and the formal training that might occur with these academic institutions. Christine, I'm going to ask you to comment on, sort of how do we understand the balance of technical skills, but also professional skills, to succeed in a company, or if you could think about how do those professional skills and value systems that the employees bring, translate to success within a company's culture.
Mm-hmm. Joe, that's a very insightful question, because I'm a big believer in, it's not just what you do in your position in terms of your technical skills and your technical execution of your work, but it's the how you do the work. And so we developed a competency model to help people understand how do we want our company to work together? What do we expect from our colleagues in terms of some common language or some common competencies that we believe will not only help us improve our performance as a company, but also help us enjoy working together more, because we'll be joined by these common competencies, these commitments to these anchors of our culture. And I'll give you an example. Agility is a really important competency in an organization in today's day and age. Teamwork, business acumen, because you are a scientist, a PhD level statistician who's leading a large, important public health project, doesn't mean you don't have to fiscally manage the project's budget very well. So you have to really also have a competency around business acumen. So these are just examples of a few of we have 5 competencies. And I think that it's helping us begin to know how to interact and also to have important conversations around performance, that we care as much about how you do your work as the actual technical aspect of your work. And it's creating those connections within our company culture that we think is very important. And I think those are great career development skills when you learn that and how to work as a part of a team that's portable. You can work, at MS, or you could work at AstraZeneca, and that skill set would still, even though the competencies might be a bit different from company to company, I think the concept is a very important professional development tool.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So we've covered we know that there's great talent being cultivated here, with lots of programming, lots of opportunity. I'm interested to know how we help that early talent transition, right? We have talent that goes off to get more education sometimes because they believe that that's going to make them more competitive. We certainly want to have a healthy, entry-level staff coming into our companies in this region. So Jim, if I could start with you, how does a UMB help early talent bridge to their first career opportunity? Do you have a talent pipeline that goes into the biopark, perhaps?
We have a pipeline. We need to be more active. We haven't put systems in place to formalize it, but I would say what happens is a lot of engagement. We bring the companies in to do to participate in department meetings. They start interacting. We have PhD students who start involving companies in the research they're doing. We start having companies engage with postdocs. So it's really building those relationships while they're still in school. As most people know, the whole PhD program, they're engaged in active research for most of the time they're getting their PhD. So by having companies in an appropriate way and engage directly with the PhD students, we're getting that pipeline to happen. Really having a scenario where we have business people in university meetings and university people in business meetings, just breaking down those barriers, which I'm embarrassed to say 10 years ago happened very, very rarely. And now, partly because we have a biopark on campus and things are very interchangeable, it's happening much more often, not just here on campus, but throughout the region.
I love it. The power of the network, right?
Yes.
It's still mostly who you know, so you need to know a lot of people. So that's fantastic. JB, I'm curious, especially you mentioned the CoLab program. Does it assist with job placement, or since the private sector has molded the curriculum, how do they then access the output of those programs?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're not designed to be ourselves a replacement for the career centers and all the career activities of the higher ed institutions. So they still will take the bulk of that work, but many of the organizations, I'll give you an example, Amazon, for example, they've set up a classic Amazon A/B testing where they'll have the same job rec, but they'll specify in one that you have this particular digital certification and not specify that in the other. And so they're trying to look directly at, who do they get? What does that pipeline look like? And then what are the needs of the students? Are the needs different? If in theory, if someone has this digital certification, then the on-the-job, remedial is not the right word, but the on-the-job digital literacy kind of things you need to learn should be less. So we're seeing more work on both sides of the market, I guess I'd say, Joe, to find the right way to marry across. It is complicated. I mean, one of the things that I was a dean of engineering and computer science prior to this, and I think the world of higher ed is getting more complicated because you are seeing, you've got lifelong learners, you've got organizations that want to have opportunities for their employees to go back and get added credentials and capabilities, and they need a tremendous amount of flexibility in the way that they're going to do that. We've got a much more diverse pipeline of talent coming from a variety of different sources with very different diverse backgrounds as well, and they need different sorts of support too. You mentioned capital. They need help with respect to social capital because they won't necessarily have come able to just connect to those networks. So I think our role is to catalyze the solutions. It's not to sort of manage all sides of that, but there's still a lot of work to do, I'd say, for all the participants in this evolving marketplace to learn how to support at scale this broader and more diverse set of ever-changing opportunity. These are tough roles my colleagues on this call have.
That's great. I'm heartened by the fact that all of you have mentioned, the importance of diversity and being more inclusive, equitable access, and you've incorporated into all of your answers. I'd like to touch on it a little more deliberately and ask each of you about how you're being more intentional, in providing equitable access, whether it's to education, it could be to training, it could be to job opportunities. So if you could each just comment on how your organization is being more deliberate in either creating or offering opportunities to maximize diversity within your organizations or programs. Christine, can we start with you?
Sure. We've done, I would say, 3 things in a very purposeful way. One is we've reimagined our diversity council. So the ability to connect the executive team with the organization and the issues important to the organization, the concerns of the organization. So we've increased the communication roads, the highways, in order to do that. So that was, I would call it structural. That was a change to how that council's been set up, and it'll be relaunched this fall. The second thing we've done is we have actually tried to incorporate inclusion very specifically as a way to add skills for teams to operate daily. So to not necessarily make it about any one group, but to make it about how can we teach and model and also reinforce through HR programs the skills needed to be an inclusive person, an inclusive leader, an inclusive manager, so that you're bringing both diversity of ideas as well as the diversity in people's backgrounds to the table, and in a very purposeful way, conscious way. The third thing we've done is as you could imagine, a company founded with statistics, we've done deep analytics around equity to make sure that we actually are being fair in terms of our promotion process and our compensation process. And so that requires a lot of hard work, actually, because there's different ways you can look at compensation and opportunity within a company. And so we've rolled up our sleeves a bit more to do the heavy lifting there. And then, of course, have made some adjustments and changes as a result of that. And then maybe there's a fourth thing I just thought of is we relaunched an emerging leaders program. And we came out with the stated goal that diversity of the first class in this Emerging Leaders program was one of our top 3 criteria, so that we wanted the class itself to be diverse and representative of our company. So that really was a statement of commitment by the company leadership that we thought was important.
Oh, thank you for that. Jim, I'll turn it over to you. Same question.
Thank you. And we have embraced several of the ideas Christine has. I think a real focus on making sure that it's a great place, a comfortable place for everyone to both be a student and also be an employee, faculty, or staff. So it is one of our core values. We just in the last several months hired our first Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at the university. We did a couple years ago start a leadership program for kind of people ready to take the next step. And that's proven to be very effective at helping to bring more people to the table and give more opportunities. We are right now, we haven't announced it, but we're working on a program specifically to recruit junior faculty to the university, focusing on minority faculty. And so part of the goal is it's all well and good to recruit somebody, but you really need to be mentored. So we'll provide some financial assistance, but I think most importantly, mentoring at the highest levels of the university so that somebody is off to a great start for their career. So it's a lot of work. It's something that we talk about every day, and the discussions we're having sometimes are tough discussions, but it's been incredibly rewarding. And I think we got a long ways to go, but we're making good progress.
That's great. Thank you for that. JB?
It's interesting. The partnership since the murder of George Floyd really has, as I mentioned at the outset, adopted inclusive growth as the frame for all of the work that we're doing. And that was a very conscious lean in toward the question of inclusion, diversity, and equity. And as I mentioned, we did a lot of work with McKinsey to look at a lot of the gaps around equity in the region. And one of the startling things is that we have an incredible, basically, I think what the organizations came to is a conclusion that diversity, equity, and inclusion are an opportunity, not a challenge. That, the more that everyone just embraces this fundamentally, because it is already a strength of the region, but it is also part of how the next generation of talent is demanding the mission be defined, that it inherently is inclusive, equitable, and diverse. So the faster everyone just gets about this becoming part and parcel of who they are and what they do, the faster they all win competitively and the region wins competitively. So I think framing the conversation that way, Joe, has been a big move by the partnership with the large employers and getting consensus across the large employers that that's the case. And then there's a variety of different things that we do. Christine mentioned you can't be effective unless you measure. So trying to make sure that everyone has mechanisms in place to accurately measure what it is that they're doing on these issues internally and then externally as well. Sharing best practices rapidly. A number of the organizations are adopting programs like MLT's Black Equity at Work. McKinsey has a Black Leadership Academy program. There's a new initiative called 110. And some of the big organizations are looking at subsidizing efforts to take those kinds of programs and allow smaller organizations to sign on to them as well, because they can otherwise look like very expensive things to try to do. So sharing best practices very rapidly, measuring outcomes as well. And then within our programs, we try to implement all of that. So for example, our Talent Ready program for the K through 12, 5 of the K through 12 jurisdictions in the region, 70% of the students that have gone through that so far are African American or Hispanic. And so we're very intentionally looking at what we're doing and trying to make sure that the specific actions we're taking are advancing that opportunity for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the region.
And Joe, if I could jump back in, I focus mostly internally, but also externally, we're trying to help the community surrounding the university. Baltimore, of course, is majority Black resident city. I mentioned the Baltimore City Community College. The vast majority of their students are minorities, mostly African American, and that training is helping them to get jobs in the life sciences field and doing very, very well. And this is not directly related to the life sciences, but we teamed with a local bank and created a microloan program that is, we have Lexington Market, just 2 blocks from my office here. And we were finding very few African-American vendors of the market. And we teamed with T. Rowe Price and Baltimore Community Lending to create a microloan program. And I expect when the new market opens, over 50% of the vendors will be African-American, and they'll be provided with them. All the vendors, new vendors will be provided with microloans and counseling and banking contacts and all the things that it takes to get a small business up and running. So we are trying to impact the leadership of the companies surrounding the university here.
That's great. I love hearing from all 3 of you that clearly DEI has become part of the fabric, right? Part of our approach to not just attraction, but also retention of talent. So as our last topic, if we could go to retention and retention strategies, I'll ask each of the panelists to give their perspective as a final thought for this session. What do you see as the value proposition for the region? And how do you deliver this proposition to your trainees or to your employees? Christine, if I could start with you, what keeps MS in the region, and how do you communicate that value proposition when you're recruiting, and then also when you're trying to retain the talent that you have?
Yeah, Joe, it's back to our mission and our history. We're deeply rooted in public health. So the NIH is a long-standing and important partner of ours now. It has been in the past, it is now, and we look to a strong future with them as well. The US government work is extremely important to global public health. The US government does a tremendous amount to support the improvement of human health through public health. And I think that our region is unique in that the major institutes, especially those in the healthcare area, are right here. So our location links to our mission. I would say very, very tightly.
That's great. Thank you. And JB, can you add anything to that value proposition with respect to infrastructure and the assets, the potential for partnering, and how does that message cascade globally? Have you seen any evidence of that?
I think I grew up in the Midwest, and I think we're not even good at humble brag. I think we've got a whole lot of assets that we can talk a lot more explicitly about and promote to a greater degree, particularly on the international front, Joe. I think the area, our proposition is that this region is the best place to build a family sustaining career. And we think that's just true. And what we have to do is make that even more clear to everyone who might want to come here, or for anyone who wants to grow their life here. I think there are 3 elements that define that. One is the mission point is in particularly this biohealth category is a particularly relevant one, particularly today. I think the fact that there are mission-oriented opportunities for family sustaining careers is in itself inherently attractive. It is inherently diverse, and as I mentioned, I think for talent that is part of how they're defining mission right now. And it has a really attractive physical environment. Again, I come from outside of the region, and I find that isn't promoted as well as it could be either. There's a remarkable diversity of sort of wonderful physical attributes. We have issues, a lot of the work we've done are around things like transportation. But, as Christine mentioned, the world of work is changing. And I think particularly in information denominated jobs in areas like biohealth, people are going to have a lot more flexibility with respect to transportation than used to be the case. So I think some of the things that were considered impediments in the past will be less so in this new world that we're in. So I think we have tremendous advantages. I think it's a matter of making the case about those advantages and making sure that that then we're connecting those opportunities in the right way to all that are interested in them.
That's great. And Jim, the same question, but perhaps a perspective of the entrepreneurial community that you're connected to, or the academic community. What do you see as the value proposition?
Yeah, from the academic community, if we look at the university system of Maryland overall, we have well over 100,000 students, and the majority of them actually stay in the state and certainly the region, including DC and Northern Virginia. So I think, and this gets into the entrepreneurial community, I think where the university is doing a better job, but there's a lot of room for further improvement, is really the direct engagement with the business community. I think we are an asset for why, well, we definitely are an asset for why companies are here, mostly because of the graduates, but I think our engagement, taking all of the expertise at the university, the research, the clinical, and the entrepreneurial, and aggressively engaging with the business community to create new companies, to create new business lines for our existing companies. So it's really that. So we're not just teaching students and then sending them out to the business community, but it's much more a relationship throughout. As we're developing our curriculum, as we're working with our students, we need to be doing that hand in hand with the business community.
Well, please take a message back to them that upon graduation, they really don't have to look far for a great opportunity to get their career started or to start a family, in the region. Fantastic, all of you. So with that, I would like to thank our panelists for their participation and insight into this important topic. Please reach out to them through the conference networking opportunities to learn more about their examples of successful talent development and sourcing. Thank you to the event organizers for their hard work to bring us together. And of course, thank you, our attendees, for spending some time with us. I do hope you've enjoyed the session, and we invite you to explore the rest of the conference. Bye for now.